The arrow had been meant for her, but Zander Hawthorne threw himself in front of it anyway, and now crimson spread across his tunic like spilled wine while Grisha stared at the human man who had just saved her life. She pressed her large green hand over the wound in his shoulder, feeling the hot blood pulse against her palm, and ignored the matching shaft protruding from her own side where a second arrow had found its mark. His gray eyes went wide as he realized what she was doing, one hand coming up to push hers away even as he swayed on his feet. "No," he gasped, his face pale beneath the dirt and sweat of battle. "You're hurt. You first." Grisha shook her head, her black braid whipping across her muscular shoulders as she kept pressure on his wound. The ambush had come out of nowhere, bandits who cared nothing for the fragile peace between humans and orcs, only for the supply wagon they had been escorting together. 3 of the attackers lay dead in the road behind them, but the rest had scattered into the forest when they realized their targets could actually fight back. "I am strong," she said, her tusked mouth forming the words carefully in the human tongue she had learned over the past months. "You bleed more. Stay still." "Always you," Zander said, and there was something broken in his voice that had nothing to do with the arrow. "You always put yourself last. Why? Why do you do that?" She did not answer because she could not with words that would make sense to him. Instead, she tore a strip from her leather vest and wadded it against his shoulder, pressing hard enough to make him hiss through his teeth. The arrow had gone clean through, which was both good and terrible. Good because nothing remained inside to fester. Terrible because he was losing blood from both sides. Her own wound throbbed with each heartbeat, a hot ache just below her ribs, but orc flesh was thick and resilient. She could survive this. She had survived worse. But Zander was human, fragile in ways her people were not, and the thought of him dying here in the mud of this forest road made something twist in her chest that hurt worse than any arrow. "We need to get you to the wagon," she said, slipping her arm around his waist. He was tall for a human, nearly her own height, but she bore most of his weight as they stumbled toward where their horses stood nervously by the overturned supply cart. "There are bandages, medicine." "You're bleeding," he protested weakly, but he was leaning on her now, his strength failing. "Grisha, I need you alive," she said, and the words came out fiercer than she intended. "So you will let me help you. Understand?" He made a sound that might have been agreement or just pain, and she half carried him the last few yards to the wagon. Someone had broken into their supplies, scattering flour and dried meat across the ground, but the medical kit was still strapped beneath the driver's seat where Zander always kept it. Grisha lowered him carefully to sit with his back against the wagon wheel, then retrieved the kit with hands that only shook a little. The arrow in her side pulled and burned as she moved, but she pushed the sensation away, focusing on Zander. His eyes had gone glassy, his breathing shallow, and fear spiked through her. Not him. Anyone but him. She had clean cloth and alcohol for wounds, needles and thread for stitching. Her hands, so deadly with a blade, became careful and gentle as she peeled away his ruined tunic to expose the puncture. The arrow had missed the lung but torn through muscle and flesh. It would need stitching, both front and back, and he would have a long recovery ahead of him. "This will hurt," she warned, uncorking the alcohol. Zander let out a breathless laugh. "Pretty sure that ship sailed when I got shot." Despite everything, despite the blood and fear and pain, Grisha felt her tusks catch her lower lip in what might have been a smile. This was the man she had come to know over 6 months of traveling together, the human who made jokes even when death breathed down his neck. The first human who had ever looked at her and seen a person instead of a monster. She poured the alcohol over his wounds and he went rigid. Teeth clenched so hard she heard them grind. She worked quickly after that, needle and thread moving with the efficiency her mother had taught her long ago. In her clan, the women learned healing alongside fighting, because warriors who could not mend themselves did not survive long on the frontier. But Grisha was no longer with her clan. She had been cast out 6 months ago for the crime of refusing to kill a human child during a raid. That child had been crying over her dead mother, and Grisha had not been able to bring herself to add orphan making to her sins. So her chieftain had exiled her, and she had wandered alone until Zander found her starving by the side of a road. He had given her food, shelter, work as his guard and traveling companion. He had never asked why an orc woman traveled alone, never demanded explanations for the scars she carried or the nightmares that sometimes woke her in the dark. He had simply accepted her, trusted her, treated her with a kindness that still left her confused and grateful in equal measure. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, without wanting to, Grisha had fallen in love with him. It was a terrible thing, loving a human. Her people would kill her for it if they knew. His people would kill him for returning such feelings if he even had them. The prejudice ran too deep, the wounds of old wars too fresh. Orcs and humans did not love each other. They fought or traded or maintained wary peace, but they did not love. She tied off the last stitch and bandaged him tightly, wrapping cloth around his shoulder and under his arm to hold everything in place. Only when she was satisfied that he would not bleed out did she sit back on her heels, exhaustion washing over her. "Your turn," Zander said, his voice still weak but more focused now. He reached for her with his good arm. "Let me see." "It is nothing," Grisha said automatically, but she swayed as she said it, her body finally acknowledging the arrow shaft still lodged in her flesh. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. "Grisha." His hand closed around her wrist, gentle but insistent. "You just stitch me up. Let me return the favor. You are wounded. You should rest. And you're about to pass out. Come here." She did not have the strength to argue. She let him guide her to sit beside him, their backs against the wagon wheel, their shoulders touching. He shifted to face her, grimacing with the movement, and his fingers were careful as they examined the arrow protruding from just below her ribs. "It went deep," he said quietly. "I am going to have to push it through and break off the head. There is no other way to remove it without tearing you apart inside." Grisha nodded. She knew the procedure, had done it herself on injured warriors. "Do it." His jaw tightened, but he did not hesitate. He braced one hand against her back and gripped the arrow shaft with the other. "On 3. 1, 2, he pushed on 2, the lying bastard, and Grisha's vision went white with pain as the arrowhead punched through her back. She heard herself make a sound, something between a gasp and a growl, and then Zander's hand was on her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. I'm sorry," he was saying over and over. "I know it hurts. Just breathe. You're doing great." She became aware that she was gripping his thigh hard enough to bruise, her claws digging into the fabric of his trousers. She forced her hand to relax, forced herself to breathe through the agony as he broke off the arrowhead and drew the shaft back out through the entry wound. Then came the alcohol, burning like liquid fire, and the needle threading through her thick green skin. Zander's hands were shaking now from exertion and blood loss, but he did not stop until her wound was closed and bandaged. When he finished, they sat together in silence, both too exhausted to move. The sun was setting, painting the forest in shades of gold and crimson. Around them, the woods were quiet except for the evening songs of birds. The bandits would not return tonight, Grisha thought. They had lost too many of their number, and both she and Zander had proven more dangerous than they appeared. "We should make camp," Zander said eventually. "We are in no condition to travel and the horses need rest." Grisha nodded and began to push herself to her feet, but Zander caught her hand. "Thank you," he said, looking up at her with those gray eyes that always seemed to see too much, "for saving my life, again." "You saved mine first," she pointed out. "The arrow that hit you was meant for me. So we are even." "No," she shook her head, choosing her words carefully. "You have saved me many times, Zander Hawthorne, in ways that have nothing to do with arrows." Something shifted in his expression, something warm and uncertain and almost frightened. His hand was still holding hers, human fingers wrapped around her larger, clawed ones. For a moment she thought he might say something important, something that would change everything between them. Instead, he cleared his throat and looked away. "We should get a fire going. It will be cold tonight." Grisha told herself the disappointment she felt was foolish and helped him to his feet. They made camp slowly, both moving like the wounded creatures they were. Grisha gathered firewood while Zander saw to the horses and sorted through the scattered supplies to find what had not been ruined. They had lost most of their food, but enough remained to make a meal of hard bread and dried meat. The medicine was safe, as were the trade goods they had been taking to the border settlement of Haven's Cross. When the fire was crackling merrily and a pot of water was heating for tea, they sat together on Zander's bedroll, sharing it because Grisha's had been slashed open by the bandits. She was acutely aware of his warmth beside her, of how his shoulder pressed against hers. "What you said earlier," Zander said, breaking the comfortable silence. "About me saving you in other ways. What did you mean?" Grisha stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. How could she explain what it meant to be seen as a person rather than a monster? To have someone trust her, rely on her, joke with her. To be treated with respect and kindness when all she had known from humans before was hatred and fear. "When you found me," she began slowly, "I was dying. Not just from hunger, from loneliness. From being cast out by my clan and hunted by humans. I had nothing, no purpose, no place, no future." She turned to look at him. "You gave those things back to me. You gave me hope." His breath caught, and in the firelight his face was soft with emotion. "You are not a burden, Grisha. You never were. You are the best traveling companion I could ask for, the bravest person I know." "I am orc," she said bluntly. "Your people hate my people. My people hate yours. What we have, this friendship, it cannot last. Eventually we will reach a place where what?" Zander interrupted. "Where I am supposed to just leave you, find some other guard. Grisha, I do not want anyone else. I want you." The words hung between them, heavy with meanings neither of them acknowledged. Grisha's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "You do not know what you are saying," she whispered. "I know exactly what I am saying." He shifted to face her fully, wincing as the movement pulled his wounded shoulder. "I have known for months. I just did not think you would want to hear it." "Why?" The word came out rough, confused. "Why would you want me? I am strong, loyal, kind, even though the world has given you every reason not to be." His good hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing along the curve of her tusk. "Beautiful." Grisha closed her eyes because looking at him hurt. "You are a fool." "Probably," he agreed, and she heard the smile in his voice. "But I am a fool who is in love with an orc woman, and I am done pretending otherwise." Her eyes snapped open. "Zander, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know it is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But we almost died today, and I realized that if I had died without telling you, I would have regretted it more than anything." Grisha reached up and covered his hand with hers, holding it against her face. Her throat felt tight. "I love you too," she said, the words coming out almost angry because she had tried so hard not to feel them. "I have loved you for months, and it is the most foolish thing I have ever done." Zander laughed, bright and surprised, and then they were kissing. His lips were soft against her tusked mouth, his hand tangling in her braid. She was careful not to hurt him, mindful of his wounds, but he pulled her closer with surprising strength. They kissed like people who had been drowning and finally found air, desperate and relieved and right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grisha rested her forehead against his. "This will not be easy," she said, "I know. Your people will call you traitor, monster lover. Let them. My clan will try to kill us both if they find us. Then we will be careful." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I have spent my whole life doing what was easy, what was expected. I joined the merchant guard because my father did. I traveled the trade roads because it was safe and profitable, but none of it meant anything until I met you. You are the first thing I have ever really wanted, Grisha, and I am not giving you up for anyone." She kissed him again, softer this time, trying to pour into it all the feelings she did not have words for. When they finally settled down to sleep, she curled carefully against his good side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Always you," he murmured into her hair. "You first, always you." "We are both first now," she said. "We look after each other." "Deal," he whispered, and they slept. The journey to Haven's Cross took another week, traveling slowly because of their injuries. The border settlement was one of the few places where humans and orcs traded openly, where the peace was more than just a ceasefire. Here, pragmatism trumped prejudice, at least most of the time. The people needed what the orcs could provide: furs, herbs, crafted weapons, and the orcs needed human grain and cloth and metal tools. So they met in this neutral place and pretended not to hate each other. Grisha had been here before, always uncomfortable with the suspicious stares and muttered curses. But now, riding in beside Zander with their horses close enough that their legs sometimes brushed, she felt different. Less like she was trespassing in a human space, and more like she belonged wherever Zander was. They delivered their trade goods to the merchant who had hired Zander, collected their pay, and found a room at the inn. The innkeeper, a grizzled woman named Martha, raised an eyebrow at Grisha but said nothing as she counted Zander's coin. "2 beds or one?" she asked dryly. "One," Zander said without hesitation, and Grisha felt her cheeks heat. Martha snorted. "Brave or stupid, I have not decided which." Rooms at the top of the stairs, last door on the right. Dinners at sunset. Their room was small but clean, with a bed just big enough for 2 if they did not mind being close. There was a wash basin and a window that looked out over the settlement's main square. Zander locked the door behind them and immediately sat down on the bed with a groan. "How is your shoulder?" Grisha asked, setting down their packs. "Sore. How is your side?" "The same." She moved to the wash basin and wet a cloth, then brought it to him. "Let me check your stitches." He let her unwrap the bandages and examine her work. The wound was healing cleanly, no sign of infection, though the stitches pulled at his skin with every movement. She washed away the dried blood and sweat, her touch gentle, and tried not to think about how intimate this was, how domestic. When she finished, he insisted on checking her wound as well, his fingers careful as he lifted her shirt. His touch sent shivers through her that had nothing to do with pain. "You heal fast," he said, sounding impressed. "It is already scarring over." "Orc blood," she said. "We are hard to kill." "Thank the gods for that." He pressed a kiss to the bandage just above the wound, and Grisha's breath caught. "I do not know what I would do if I lost you." "You are not losing me," she said firmly. "I am staying right here." They ate dinner in the common room, enduring the stares and whispers. A few of the patrons were openly hostile, muttering about greenskins and beasts, but most seemed merely curious. It was not every day an orc and human sat together like companions, much less like lovers. Halfway through the meal, a young human woman approached their table. She was pretty in a delicate way that made Grisha feel large and clumsy by comparison, with golden hair and blue eyes. She smiled at Zander, ignoring Grisha entirely. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sweet as honey. "But are you a merchant guard? I am traveling north and could use an escort." "I would pay well." Zander barely glanced at her. "I am not available." "Oh." The woman's gaze flicked to Grisha, then back to Zander, confusion clear on her face. "Are you already contracted?" "I am already committed," Zander said, and he reached across the table to take Grisha's hand. "To her." The woman's eyes went wide, then narrowed with disgust. She opened her mouth, perhaps to say something cutting, but Grisha bared her tusks in a smile that was not at all friendly, and the woman fled back to her own table. "That was cruel," Grisha said, but she was fighting a grin. "She was rude," Zander replied. "Pretending you did not exist. I will not tolerate that." Something warm bloomed in Grisha's chest. No one had ever defended her before, not like that. She squeezed his hand, letting him see the gratitude in her eyes. They finished their meal and retired to their room. The bed was soft, infinitely better than sleeping on the ground, and they lay together in the darkness, tangled up in each other. Zander's head was on her shoulder, his arm draped across her waist, and Grisha stroked his hair with careful fingers. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Where do we go from here?" "Wherever we want," Zander said. "I have enough saved to buy a piece of land, something remote where no one will bother us. We could build a house, maybe start a farm." Grisha tried to imagine it. A home that was hers, where she did not have to hide or run or fight. Land to work, a garden to tend, a life of peace with the man she loved. It seemed impossible, too good to be true. "Your family," she said. "Would they not object?" Zander was quiet for a long moment. "My father is dead. My mother remarried and moved east. I have a brother, but we have not spoken in years. There is no one whose opinion matters more than my own happiness." He tilted his head to look up at her. "What about you? Your clan?" "I am dead to them," Grisha said flatly. "They cast me out. If I returned, they would kill me for the dishonor I brought them." "Then we are both free," Zander said. "Free to make our own choices, our own life. It will not be easy, but I think it will be good. I think it will be ours." Grisha kissed the top of his head, breathing in the scent of him. "Then we will make it work." They stayed in Haven's Cross for 3 days while their wounds continued to heal. During that time, Zander made inquiries about land for sale in the region. There were a few options, small plots carved out of the wilderness by settlers who had given up and moved on. Most were too close to human settlements for Grisha's comfort, but one was promising. It was a half-day's ride north, deep in the forest that bordered orc territory. 20 acres of cleared land with a small cabin, a well, and a barn that needed repairs. The previous owner had died of fever the winter before, and his widow had moved back to live with her daughter in the south. She was selling cheap, eager to be rid of the property and its memories. Zander and Grisha rode out to see it on their 4th day in Haven's Cross. The trail was overgrown but passable, winding through dense forest that muffled sound and blocked the sky. Grisha felt something in her chest ease as they rode. This was closer to the wild places she had known as a child, before clan and duty and war had consumed her life. The cabin came into view through the trees, small and sturdy with a stone chimney. The clearing around it was choked with weeds, the garden fence broken in places, but the bones of a good homestead were there. The barn sagged on one side and the well cover was rotting, but those were problems that could be fixed with time and labor. Zander dismounted and helped Grisha down, both of them moving gingerly. His shoulder was still stiff and her side still ached, but they were healing well. They walked through the property together, imagining what it could become. "The cabin needs a new roof," Zander said, squinting up at it, "and the windows should be replaced, but the structure is sound. The barn can be rebuilt, Grisha added, and the land is good, rich soil, plenty of water. We could grow vegetables, maybe keep chickens and goats. You know farming? Zander sounded surprised. Grisha nodded. My clan was not always at war. When I was young, we had fields, gardens. I know how to make things grow. They stood together in the overgrown yard, their shoulders touching, and Grisha could see it. Could see the cabin with a new roof and smoke curling from the chimney. Could see a garden bursting with vegetables, chickens scratching in the yard, goats bleating in a repaired barn. Could see a life where she and Zander worked side by side during the day and held each other at night. I want this, she said, her voice rough with emotion. I want this so much. Zander turned to her, his gray eyes bright. Then it is ours. They returned to Haven's Cross, and Zander paid the widow's asking price. No negotiation needed. The woman seemed relieved to be done with it, signing over the deed without questions about who would be living there. Probably she assumed Grisha was just hired help, not Zander's partner in every sense. Let her think what she wanted. By the time they moved onto the property with a wagon full of supplies, it was late spring and the world was green and growing. They spent their first night in the cabin lying on blankets on the floor, the roof still incomplete above them. Through the gaps they could see stars, and Grisha fell asleep counting them while Zander's breathing evened out beside her. The work was hard, but good. Zander proved surprisingly skilled with tools, patching the roof and replacing the windows with steady competence. Grisha rebuilt the barn almost single-handedly, her orc strength making quick work of hauling timber and lifting beams. They worked from sunrise to sunset, their bodies aching and their hands blistered, and it was the happiest Grisha had ever been. The garden was her particular pride. She tilled the weedy earth and planted seeds they had bought in Haven's Cross. Carrots and potatoes, beans and squash, herbs for cooking and healing. She built trellises for climbing plants and scarecrows to frighten the birds. Every morning she walked the rows, checking for growth, and every evening she reported their progress to Zander like it was the most important news in the world. The beans have sprouted, she would say, her voice full of wonder, and Zander would grin at her like she had announced the birth of a child. They bought chickens from a farmer who did not ask questions about why an orc and human were setting up house together. The birds were stupid and loud, and Grisha loved them fiercely. She built them a coop and fenced a yard to keep them safe from foxes. In the mornings, she collected eggs and scattered grain, talking to the hens like they could understand her. Summer came in full and heavy, and they worked in the heat until they were both dripping with sweat. In the evenings, they bathed in the stream that ran through the eastern edge of their property, washing away the day's grime in water so cold it made them gasp. Grisha learned every scar on Zander's body, every freckle and callus. He learned the patterns of her green skin, the places where old battle wounds had left her hide thick and numb. They made love under the stars, on the soft moss by the stream, their bodies fitting together like they were made for this. Grisha was always careful of her strength, always aware that she could hurt him if she forgot herself. But Zander was not as fragile as she feared, and he taught her that passion did not have to be gentle to be good. I love you, he would whisper against her skin, over and over, until the words lost meaning and became simply the truth of them, fundamental as breathing. I love you, she would answer, her voice breaking with the weight of it. Their peace lasted through summer and into the early fall. They had a good harvest, the cellar filling with preserved vegetables and the coop full of fat chickens. Zander had even managed to acquire 2 goats, which Grisha named Trouble and More Trouble for their habit of escaping their pen. Life was hard but simple, and for the first time in her life, Grisha felt like she belonged somewhere. But peace on the frontier was always fragile. The trouble came on a cold morning in late autumn. Grisha was in the garden, harvesting the last of the squash before the first hard freeze, when she heard horses approaching. Not the slow, easy gait of travelers, but the purposeful rhythm of riders who knew where they were going. She dropped the squash and ran for the cabin, bursting through the door. "Zander! Riders coming!" He was at the table, mending a broken harness, but he stood immediately. His hand went to the sword he kept by the door, the blade he had not touched in months. How many? 4, maybe 5. Moving fast. They moved together to the window, peering out through the crude glass. The riders came into view a moment later, and Grisha's blood went cold. Orcs. 5 of them, mounted on the heavy war horses her people favored. They wore the dark leather and bone ornaments of her old clan, and at their head rode a warrior she knew too well, Crag. Her former shield brother, the male she had once fought beside before her exile. He had been the one to escort her from clan lands, the one to tell her she was dead to them now. She had not expected to ever see him again. "They are from your clan," Zander said, reading her expression. "Yes." Her hands were shaking. "They should not be here. This is not their territory. They are here for you." It was not a question. Grisha nodded, her mind racing. Crag would not have come this far alone, would not have brought warriors unless the clan had sanctioned it. But why now? She had been gone for over a year, living quietly, causing no trouble. The riders stopped in the yard, their horses stamping and blowing. Crag dismounted with the easy grace of a lifelong warrior, his hand on the axe at his belt. He was bigger than Grisha remembered, his green skin marked with new battle scars, his tusks filed to sharp points. "Grisha," he called, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. "I know you are in there. Come out. We need to talk." Grisha looked at Zander. His jaw was set, his sword in his hand, but she could see the fear in his eyes. Not for himself, she realized. For her. "Stay here," she said. "Like hell," he replied. "We face this together." "Zander, together," he repeated firmly, and there was no arguing with that tone. They walked out of the cabin side by side, Grisha unarmed and Zander with his sword held loosely at his side. The orc warriors tensed at the sight of the human, hands moving to weapons, but Crag held up a hand to stop them. "Grisha," he said again, and his eyes moved from her to Zander and back. Something like pity crossed his scarred face. "So the rumors are true." "What rumors?" Grisha asked, though she could guess. "That you are living with a human, that you have taken one as a mate." Crag's lip curled. "The clan did not believe it. I did not believe it. But here you are, proving us all right." "I am exiled," Grisha said, keeping her voice steady. "What I do is no concern of the clan." "You are wrong." Crag took a step forward. "You were exiled for refusing to kill a human child. Shameful, but understandable. Weakness can be forgiven. But this," he gestured at Zander with disgust. "Lying with the enemy, taking one into your bed. This is betrayal." "I have betrayed no one," Grisha said, anger heating her blood. "I am not part of the clan anymore. You made that clear when you cast me out." "You are still orc," Crag roared. "You still carry our blood, our honor, and you shame both by rutting with this human filth." Zander moved before Grisha could stop him, stepping forward with his sword raised. "Watch your tongue when you speak about her." The orc warriors drew their weapons with a sound like thunder, axes and swords gleaming in the autumn sun. Crag laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "The human speaks." "Tell me, little man, do you think you can stand against us? You are 1, we are 5. You will die here." "Then I die defending her," Zander said simply. "It is as good a death as any." Grisha's heart clenched. She stepped between Zander and the warriors, her arms spread wide. "No. If you have come to kill me for my crimes, so be it. But he has done nothing wrong. He did not seek me out, I came to him. Let him live. Let him live, Crag shook his head. So he can tell others about us, about what happens when orcs mate with humans. No, Grisha. If we let him live, others will think it is acceptable. There will be more like you, more traitors. The clan cannot allow it. The clan has no authority here, Grisha said desperately. This is neutral land. There is no neutral land in this war, Crag replied. There are only sides. And you chose the wrong one. He raised his axe, signaling the others to advance. Grisha had a single heartbeat to make a choice. She could fight, try to hold them off long enough for Zander to escape. She was a skilled warrior, but 5 against 1 were impossible odds, especially when Crag was among them. Or she could surrender, hope that her death would satisfy them and they would leave Zander alive. But she knew they would not. They would kill him just to erase the evidence of her shame. So she chose the third option. Wait, she shouted, her voice cracking like a whip. I challenge you, Crag, single combat the old way. If I win, you leave us in peace. If you win, you can do what you came for. Crag paused, frowning. The old ways were sacred to her people, laws that predated the clans themselves. A challenge issued in earnest could not be refused without dishonor, and for all his talk of her shame, Crag was a warrior who valued honor above all else. You are already exiled, he said slowly. You have no right to the old ways. I am still orc, Grisha threw his own words back at him. I still carry the blood, or was that a lie? Am I orc or am I not? She saw the trap close around him. If he said she was not orc, he admitted she had no duty to the clan's honor and therefore could not be punished for breaking it. If he said she was orc, he had to accept her challenge. Crag's eyes narrowed. You always were clever. Fine, I accept your challenge. But know this, Grisha. I will not hold back because we once fought together. I will kill you. I would expect nothing less, Grisha said. Zander grabbed her arm, his face pale. What are you doing? You are still healing. Your wound is healed enough, she said, covering his hand with hers. I can do this, Zander. Trust me. I do trust you, he said hoarsely. That is not the point. The point is I cannot lose you. She turned to face him fully, memorizing his features. The gray eyes that looked at her with such love. The strong jaw and the scar on his left cheekbone from a fight long ago. The way his hair fell across his forehead. You will not lose me, she promised, and kissed him hard enough to bruise. I am coming back to you. You better, he whispered against her lips and let her go. Grisha turned back to Crag. I am ready. The other warriors formed a circle, marking the bounds of the combat. Crag stripped off his leather jerkin and hefted his axe, testing its weight. Grisha had no weapon, but one of the warriors tossed her a short sword. Not her preferred blade, but it would do. They faced each other across the trampled grass of the yard. This was the land she and Zander had cleared together, the home they had built. She would not let it become her grave. Crag attacked first, his axe whistling through the air in a brutal overhead chop. Grisha sidestepped, letting the blade bite into earth and slashed at his exposed side. He twisted away, faster than his bulk suggested, and brought the axe back around in a horizontal swing. They traded blows, testing each other's defenses. Grisha had always been quick, but Crag was strong, each strike of his axe carrying enough force to shatter bone if it connected. She could not afford to block directly, could not match his strength. She had to be faster, smarter. Her wound pulled as she moved, a sharp reminder of her recent injury. Not healed enough, not really. But she pushed the pain away and focused. Crag feinted left and struck right, and Grisha almost fell for it. She threw herself back, the axe missing her by inches, and lashed out with her sword. The tip caught Crag's shoulder, drawing blood, first blood to her. The watching warriors murmured. Crag's eyes hardened. He came at her harder, relentless, driving her back across the yard. Grisha's breath came hard and fast, her sides screaming with each movement. She stumbled on the uneven ground and Crag pressed his advantage, swinging the axe in a diagonal slash meant to take her head. She dropped and rolled, coming up behind him, and slammed her elbow into his kidney. Crag grunted and spun, faster than she expected, his fist catching her in the jaw. Pain exploded through her skull and she tasted blood. They separated, circling, both breathing hard. Grisha's vision swam, but she blinked it clear. She could not afford distraction, could not afford weakness. "You have gotten slow," Crag panted. "Soft living with your human." "You talk too much," Grisha replied and attacked. She feinted high and went low, her sword slicing across Crag's thigh. He roared and brought the axe down in a wild swing that Grisha barely avoided. She felt the wind of its passage, felt how close death had come, and then she saw her opening. Crag had overextended, his weight forward, his guard down. Grisha moved on instinct, the way she had been trained. She stepped inside his reach, too close for the axe to be effective, and drove her sword up under his ribs. Crag's eyes went wide. The axe fell from his nerveless fingers and he sank to his knees, blood bubbling from his lips. Grisha pulled her sword free and stepped back, watching him fall. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "You were a good shield brother once." Crag coughed, a wet, terrible sound. "You were always too soft," he said. "But you always were the better fighter. I should have remembered that." He fell forward into the dirt and was still. Grisha turned to face the other warriors, raising her bloody sword. "The challenge is won. You will leave now, or you will die here." For a moment she thought they would attack anyway, honor be damned. But then the largest of them, a scarred female named Thrak, sheathed her weapon. "The old ways are satisfied," Thrak said, her voice grudging. "You won fairly. We will go." She looked at Grisha with something that might have been respect. "But know this. If you ever return to clan lands, if you ever make yourself our problem again, there will be no challenges. We will simply kill you." "Understood," Grisha said. The warriors mounted their horses, loading Crag's body across his saddle. They rode away without looking back, disappearing into the forest as quickly as they had come. When they were gone, Grisha's legs gave out. She sank to the ground, the sword falling from her hand. Everything hurt. Her jaw, her side, her heart. And then Zander was there, kneeling beside her, his hands on her face. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "I am fine," she managed. "Just tired." "You scared me," he said, and his voice broke. "You scared me so much, Grisha. I thought I was going to lose you." She pulled him into her arms, holding him tight despite the pain. "I told you. I am not going anywhere. You are stuck with me." He laughed, high and wild with relief, and kissed her. They stayed there on the ground, wrapped around each other, until the sun began to set and the cold drove them inside. That night, as they lay in bed, Zander's fingers tracing idle patterns on her skin, he said, "What if they come back? What if the clan sends more warriors?" "They will not," Grisha said with more confidence than she felt. "I defeated their champion in fair combat. To come after me now would be to admit that their laws mean nothing. They cannot afford that. But what if," she silenced him with a kiss, "then we will face it together, you and me." Like always. He relaxed against her, his head on her chest, listening to her heartbeat. "Together," he echoed. Winter came hard and fast that year. Snow fell in thick drifts, covering their little homestead in white silence. They spent their days keeping the fires burning and their nights curled together under piles of furs. The goats huddled in the barn and the chickens roosted close, everyone trying to stay warm. Grisha loved it. Loved the quiet, the peace, the way the whole world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them and their small house. She taught Zander orc songs from her childhood, the old ones about winter and survival and the strength of community. He taught her to read and write in the human script, painstakingly forming letters until her thick fingers learned the shapes. They made love by firelight, their bodies creating warmth in the cold. Zander traced the scars on her skin and told her stories about each of his own. They learned each other completely inside and out until they knew each other's bodies as well as their own. "I want to marry you," Zander said one night, the words coming out of nowhere. Grisha blinked at him. "Marry? Yes, I know it is not done, not between humans and orcs, but I do not care. I want you to be my wife. I want to stand up in front of anyone who cares to listen and declare that you are mine and I am yours." "There is no one here to stand in front of," Grisha pointed out, but her heart was racing. "Then we will do it for us," Zander said. "We will make our own vows in our own way. Please, Grisha, let me marry you." She looked at this human man who had saved her life in ways large and small, who loved her despite every reason not to, who had built a home and a future with her. How could she say anything but yes? "I will marry you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But we do it the orc way. A blood bond." "Tell me how," Zander said immediately, so she did. She explained the old ritual, the one used by orc couples for generations. A cut on each palm, blood mingled, vows spoken under the open sky. It was simple and permanent, a bond that could not be broken. They waited for a clear night when the stars were bright and the moon full. They dressed in their best clothes, Grisha in the leather vest Zander had bought her in Haven's Cross and Zander in a shirt he had painstakingly mended. They walked out into the snowy yard, their breath pluming in the cold air. Grisha had a small knife, sharp and clean. She cut her palm first, then Zander's, and they pressed their hands together. Blood mingled, hot against the winter chill. "I vow to stand with you," Grisha said, the traditional words of her people. "In times of plenty and times of want, in battle and in peace. Your enemies are my enemies. Your joys are my joys. I bind my life to yours until death parts us." "I vow the same," Zander said, his gray eyes locked on hers. "I stand with you, Grisha, today and every day. You are my wife, my partner, my love. I am yours now and always." They kissed under the stars, their blood mixing, their futures binding together. When they finally broke apart, both were crying, tears freezing on their cheeks. "We are married," Zander said, wonder in his voice. "We are married," Grisha agreed, and it was the happiest moment of her life. Spring came eventually, as it always did. The snow melted, the streams swelled with runoff, and green things began to grow. Grisha returned to her garden with a vengeance, planting twice as much as the year before. Zander made plans to expand the barn, maybe get a cow to go with their goats. Life settled into a rhythm. Work and rest, love and laughter, the simple pleasure of building something that was theirs. They were happy in a way that seemed impossible. Two people from warring races making a life together against all odds. But happiness on the frontier was never guaranteed. The humans came in late spring, a party of 6 soldiers wearing the colors of the king's army. Grisha was working in the garden when she heard the horses, and her blood went cold. Soldiers meant trouble, always had. She ran for the cabin, shouting for Zander. He met her at the door, his face grim. They had both known this day might come, had both dreaded it. But here it was, unavoidable. The soldiers stopped in the yard, their captain dismounting with the easy authority of a man used to command. He was middle-aged and scarred, with hard eyes that took in the homestead, the orc woman, the human man. "Zander Hawthorne?" he asked. "Yes," Zander said, stepping forward. "What is this about?" "Information has reached the king about a human living with an orc. Unnatural relations, they are calling it. I am here to investigate." Grisha felt her stomach drop. Someone had talked, had reported them. Maybe a traveler who had passed by, maybe someone from Haven's Cross who had put together the rumors. It did not matter. What mattered was that the humans knew and they were here. "I am not breaking any laws," Zander said carefully. "I am living on my own land, harming no one." "You are cohabiting with an orc," the captain said flatly. "Some would call that treason." "Some would be idiots," Zander replied, his voice hard. "She is my wife. We are married. That is not treason, that is love." The soldiers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. The captain's jaw tightened. "The king is concerned about human-orc relations," he said. "The peace is fragile. If word spreads that humans and orcs are marrying, it could undermine the negotiations." "So you want me to what?" Zander demanded. "Leave her. Pretend she does not exist." "I want you to understand the situation," the captain said. "If you continue this relationship, you will be seen as a traitor. You will be shunned by human society, possibly arrested. Is she really worth all that?" "Yes," Zander said without hesitation. "She is worth everything." Grisha's throat tightened. She stepped up beside Zander, taking his hand. "I will leave," she said quietly. "If my presence here causes him trouble, I will go." "No," Zander said immediately, rounding on her. "Absolutely not. We are married. You are not going anywhere." "Zander, no." His voice cracked. "I have lost too much in my life. I am not losing you. I do not care what the king thinks. I do not care what anyone thinks. You are staying." The captain watched this exchange with something like pity. "You are making a mistake," he said. "Both of you, this will not end well." "Maybe not," Zander said, "but it is our mistake to make." The captain shook his head and remounted his horse. "I will report that I found nothing of concern here. A human living alone on the frontier, but I cannot keep others from investigating if the rumors continue. You should consider relocating, somewhere even more remote, and for God's sake be discreet." He signaled his men and they rode away, leaving Zander and Grisha standing in the yard, hands clasped tight. "We should listen to him," Grisha said when they were gone. "We should move." "Where?" Zander asked bitterly. "There is nowhere we can go where we will not face this. Human lands, orc lands, it does not matter. Everyone will hate us." "Then we go deeper into the wilderness," Grisha said. "Far from humans and orcs both. We find a place where no one will bother us." Zander looked at the cabin, the barn, the garden, all the work they had put into this place, all the love. "I do not want to leave," he said. "This is our home." "Home is wherever you are," Grisha said firmly. "The place does not matter, only us." He turned to her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You would do that, give up everything we built here." "I would do anything for you," she said simply. "You know that." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You gave me bread when I was starving," Grisha said, remembering that day so long ago. "You saw me as a person when everyone else saw a monster. That was enough." They spent the next week preparing to leave. It broke Grisha's heart to abandon the garden just as it was starting to thrive, to leave behind the chickens and goats they had raised. But they sold what they could in Haven's Cross and packed what they could carry. The cabin they simply locked up, hoping that maybe someday they could return. They rode north, deeper into the wild mountains that formed the border between human and orc lands. Here the trees grew thick and old, the streams ran clear and cold, and the only settlements were tiny outposts of trappers and hunters who asked no questions. It took them 2 weeks to find a new place, a small valley hidden between peaks, with a meadow and a spring and enough shelter to build a home. It was even more remote than their first homestead, accessible only by a narrow trail that would be impassable in winter. "This is it," Zander said, standing in the meadow and looking around. "This is where we start over." Grisha took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "We start over together." They built a new cabin, smaller than the first but sturdy. They planted a new garden and acquired new chickens from a trapper who did not care what species his customers were. They made a life in that hidden valley, and it was good. Summer passed into fall, fall into winter. They survived the cold and the isolation, keeping each other company through the long, dark months. Spring came again, and with it, news. A trapper stopped by their valley, a grizzled old man who traded furs and gossip. He told them that tensions between humans and orcs were rising again, that there had been skirmishes on the border. The peace was failing, everyone could feel it, but he also told them something else. There were others like them, he said. Other couples, human and orc, living in hiding. Not many, but enough that people were starting to talk, starting to wonder if maybe the old hatreds did not have to last forever. "You two are not alone," the trapper said, accepting the tea Grisha offered him. "There are others who believe love matters more than blood." It was a small hope, a fragile one, but it was hope nonetheless. That night, lying in bed, Zander said, "Do you think it will ever be different? Do you think humans and orcs will ever really have peace?" "I do not know," Grisha said honestly, "but I think we are proof that it is possible. If you and I can love each other, can build a life together, then maybe others can too." "I hope so," Zander said. "I hope someday we can live openly without fear. I hope our children, if we have any, grow up in a world where they do not have to hide what they are." Grisha's breath caught. "Children, if you want them," Zander said carefully. "I know it is complicated, human and orc. I do not even know if it is possible. But if it is, I would like to try. A family with you, Grisha, that would make everything perfect." She thought about it. A child, half human and half orc. It would be difficult, would face prejudice from both sides, but it would also be loved fiercely and completely by two parents who understood what it meant to be different. "I would like that," she said softly. "A family. With you." They made love that night with new purpose, new hope. And when spring turned to summer and Grisha realized her courses had stopped, when her belly began to swell with new life, they both cried with joy. The pregnancy was hard. Orc women were built to carry orc children, and Grisha did not know how her body would handle a half-human child. But she was strong, stronger than she had ever been, and she endured. Zander was terrified and wonderful, fussing over her constantly, making sure she ate enough and rested enough and did not overexert herself. Grisha let him fuss because she knew it made him feel useful, even though she was perfectly capable of splitting firewood well into her 7th month. Their daughter was born in the autumn, when the leaves were turning gold and red. The labor was long and brutal, but when Grisha finally held the squirming, crying infant, all the pain was forgotten. She was perfect. Small like human babies with green skin a shade lighter than Grisha's. She had tiny tusks, barely more than nubs, and her ears were pointed like an orc's but smaller. Her eyes were gray like her father's, and she had a full head of black hair. "She is beautiful," Zander whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "She is perfect." They named her Zara, a name that worked in both human and orc tongues. She was loud and demanding and absolutely everything to them. Grisha had never imagined she could love something as much as she loved this tiny, helpless creature. Watching Zander with their daughter was almost painful in its sweetness. He held her like she was made of glass, sang to her in a voice rough with disuse, stayed up all night when she was fussy just so Grisha could rest. He was a natural father, patient and loving and endlessly gentle. "We made this," he would say sometimes, staring at Zara in wonder. "We made a person. How is that possible?" Very carefully, Grisha would reply, and they would laugh together. Zara grew quickly, hitting milestones that amazed them both. She was stronger than a human baby, but not as strong as an orc, smart and curious and fearless. By the time she was 2, she was climbing everything and getting into constant mischief. Grisha and Zander spent most of their time chasing after her, exhausted and happy. The trapper visited occasionally, bringing news of the outside world. The war between humans and orcs had not reignited, but neither had real peace been achieved. The situation remained tense, uncertain. But he also brought stories of other mixed families, other children like Zara. They were rare, but they existed. "The world is changing," the trapper said one day, watching Zara toddle after a butterfly. "Slowly, but it is changing. Maybe by the time she is grown it will be different, better." "I hope so," Grisha said. "I want her to have a better life than we did." "You gave her the best life," the trapper replied. "You gave her love. That is all any child really needs." Years passed. Zara grew from a toddler into a little girl, bright and brave and full of questions. They taught her about both sides of her heritage, human and orc, wanting her to be proud of what she was. They taught her to read and write, to hunt and garden, to fight if she had to, but to choose peace when she could. She asked about the world beyond their valley sometimes, about why they lived alone instead of in a town or village. Grisha and Zander told her the truth, carefully and gently, that some people would not understand a family like theirs, would be afraid or angry. But that did not mean they were wrong to love each other. "When I grow up," Zara announced one day, "I am going to make humans and orcs be friends. I am going to tell everyone that they are stupid for fighting." "That is a good goal," Zander said seriously. "Very ambitious." "I am very ambitious," Zara replied with the absolute confidence of a 7-year-old. Grisha watched her daughter run off to play, her heart full. This child, this impossible, wonderful child, was proof that love could overcome anything. That barriers between species were not as insurmountable as everyone believed. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, Zander turned to Grisha. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Choosing me? Giving up your clan, your people, everything you knew?" Grisha looked at him, at the gray eyes she knew better than her own, at the face that had become home to her. She looked at their cabin, at the garden she tended, at Zara playing in the meadow. She thought about the life they had built together, the love they shared, the future they were creating. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. You are my people now. You and Zara, you are everything." He smiled, that soft smile that was just for her, and kissed her gently. "You are everything to me too. Always have been, from the moment I met you. Even when I was starving and covered in mud, especially then," he said, and they laughed together. As darkness fell and they called Zara inside for dinner, Grisha felt a peace she had never known before. This was home. This was family. This was love in its truest form, the kind that transcended race and prejudice and fear. They had faced exile and violence, soldiers and warriors, the hatred of both their peoples. They had given up everything for each other and never looked back. And what they had built in return was worth more than kingdoms, more than honor or glory or acceptance. They had built a life, together. And it was beautiful. Zara fell asleep that night between them, her small body warm and solid, her breathing deep and even. Zander's arm was around Grisha, her head on his shoulder, and they lay in the darkness listening to their daughter's heartbeat. "She's going to change the world," Zander whispered. "She already has," Grisha replied. "She changed ours." And in that moment, in that small cabin in a hidden valley far from the judgment of the world, everything was exactly as it should be. They were together. They were a family. They were home. The future would bring its own challenges, its own struggles. But whatever came, they would face it the way they had faced everything else. Together. Always together, because that was what love meant. Not putting the other person first, but putting each other first. Always you, always us, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.